Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and as our regular viewers will know, sometimes we like to change things up a little bit on this show and feature not just our human guests, but some non-human guests as well. Tonight is one of those nights. Our human guests are the people from the Greater Chicagoland Caged Bird Club, and the non-human guests, as you can see, are the birds who are not at the moment caged. So we have Rick Duffy, Siobhan Duffy, and Diana Federal. So welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
Well, it's such an unusual sounding name, the Caged Bird Club. So what's that about?
It was originally started in 1938 by some canary breeders. And the club was basically started to show canaries. And over the years, more breeders joined, and then the club evolved into rescue since there was a need for it. We still have our annual show. We're going to have our 83rd annual show this year, and but we have monthly meetings that people can come to learn about birds, and we put on 2 fairs plus the show every year.
So the primary purpose, though, of the club is to take the birds that, as you use the word rescue, and to have them adopted out. Is that correct?
Well, that started about 25 years ago. A woman named Jean Sangster saw the need for this. Right in the 1980s, there was just this boom of birds. Everybody was buying them. They were coming in imports, and she knew that sooner or later they would be unwanted. And a lot of them are. You're never unwanted. And
Yes,
so
they like to talk to you
We've
back.
been around for that many years. We used a foster home thing. People kept them in their homes, but we finally got so many birds that we now have a facility, 204 South Villa in Villa Park, where we keep them.
How many birds are currently in residence at the club?
You know, it just weeps to count them. I think we have about 20 of these larger birds, and
Probably about 30, 35 canaries, cockatiels, not canaries, parakeets and cockatiels.
parakeets, cockatiels, lovebirds.
Finches.
Yeah. And to count those is just, they move too fast in the cage.
Right. But there's many dozens of birds there.
Yes.
Yes.
And we're now shuddering because the season people start giving up birds will soon be upon us. Because there are ups and downs of the season. Before the holidays, people suddenly develop allergies to birds, or they move away, or they go to school, or then we get a big influx.
Now, one of the things I think that many people don't realize is that many birds, including several of these, have very long lifespans.
Oh yeah, that's where we get a lot of them. Jellybean up there on Siobhan's shoulder, the man was really too old to keep her. He had to move to a smaller apartment for elderly people, and she would not have fit in.
So what
She's about my age, and in bird terms, that's about my age.
Okay. So what type of bird is Jellybean?
Jellybean is a blue and gold macaw, the most common macaw you'll see. They're also about as big as caged birds get. She looks bigger than she is. She's only about 2.5 pounds, maybe 3. Jellybean's big for her species. She's got maybe 300 pounds of bite pressure up there. Yes, hi, babe.
300 pounds?
Yeah.
Meaning that if she were not happy with you, she could do you
Yeah.
some serious damage, right?
Yeah, I have some odd scars as a lifelong bird keeper. But she's fortunately, like most blue and golds who have been handled and trained well. Yes, I love you too, Kelly. Is a pretty easy bird to handle.
Now,
though not a starter bird.
I noticed as we were setting up the show that you talk to the birds in very human terms, as though they understand what you're saying. Do you?
They do
find
understand. They do understand what you're saying, and we do have birds in the shelter who will answer you
Really?
simple questions. And when I come into the shelter in the mornings, I'll say, "Good morning, everyone," and I hear, "Hello, how are you? Good morning," right back at me.
That's part of it. The other part may be that we're just a bit strange.
Of these guys, Jellybean, Timbo, and maybe Kelly can all talk, and they do it in an intelligible way. She won't now because they never perform. That's all the noise we're going to hear out of her tonight.
Yeah.
I love you. But They
So
also
how much do you? But you get the sense that they understand the actual language, right? When you talk to them.
in some ways, I think birds are easier than dogs and cats. Dogs and cats have a very nonverbal scent and body language based relationship with the world. Birds are a lot more like us in that they're social, or at least this parrots, and they communicate in a large part by yelling. So they can understand what we're doing.
Yeah.
They mimic human conversation. They can read tone of voice. They have kinds of noises and voices and songs that they like. A lot of these guys will dance if you put on music.
Oh.
And they're doing a lot of studies on birds now, and they're finding that birds do vocalize. When they're in the wild, they vocalize to each other, and they do have they have patterns of vocalization that they understand. So a lot of them very much understand what we're talking about, even if they can't
really communicate it back in human language. Though they can mimic human language.
Yeah.
And is it your sense that they actually understand the words that they say?
Depends on the bird.
Okay.
Some of them do.
For instance, if you come in, hello. If you leave, goodbye. If she knows she's being bad or another bird is being bad, no, stop. Hey, step up. No.
Yeah.
And Kelly here is being very emotive, though I haven't heard him say any words in the months he's been at the shelter. But you're getting crankiness right now. He's up past his bedtime. But.
Oh, gotcha. Well, just a friend of mine who lives in California has a Moluccan cockatoo, and when my wife and I visited some years ago, my friend was used to, the bird loved a hot shower, so sometimes he would take the bird in with him into the shower because, it's a tropical bird. So as we arrived, the bird made a pass at my wife and looked at my wife and said, "Want to take a shower?"
Yeah.
I thought, that's pretty uppity for, we just got here.
We know things like that.
They do things like that. They're highly intelligent, and they're so amusing, and
They're
they
intelligent.
love to show off.
It has recently been discovered that their intelligence is not in a cerebral cortex, which they don't have, but in the midbrain. There are areas there that function as logic centers and memory that mammals don't have. It's also the part of the brain that controls emotion. Our emotions come from the midbrain, but their emotions, therefore, get all mixed up with their intellect.
That sounds like some people I know. Yeah.
Yeah. But with them, it's just they're coming from the same area of the brain, so to speak.
Now, Siobhan, you mentioned earlier that the bird on your shoulder is not a starter bird. So describe that. What does that mean?
Well, for one thing, she's just physically intimidating. Even the most placid macaw in the world, if they get startled by a thunderstorm or just are having a bad day, can do fairly significant damage. And if you're not used to reading bird body language, you would regret it. Yes, I love you. She's big. Scarlets, green wings, and hyacinths are even bigger. I mean, not on a huge scale, but big.
So,
Also,
if you wanted to have birds, I mean, as I was growing up, we had parakeets.
Right.
So, I mean, is that really what you do?
You start with parakeets and cockatiels. They're nice, small birds. They're friendly. They're easy to get along with. Then if you can take care of those, you move up to something like a conure, or that's a conure also, or maybe even a gray, which are not hard to get along with. If you really want to get into it, then you get into the cockatoos and the Amazons and the macaws. But we always say that, this is like, these birds live a long time, and it's like having a 2-year-old or 3-year-old forever and ever, because they never get any older.
Yeah.
And they have a toolkit built in on their face, okay? And so imagine having a toddler throwing a tantrum with a saw and a hammer in its hands, and that you got a macaw who's having a bad day. So you've got to know how to handle it.
And how would you handle that? What do you do?
You back off and let him calm down.
A rough rule is the bigger the bird, and there's some variation. Some of the smartest and most active and most difficult are the grays, and as you can see, they're not any bigger than Kelly, who's an Amazon. But the more stimulation they'll need, the more they're likely to try to outsmart you just for fun, the more elaborate and weird their temper tantrums will get. So the more difficult birds are a personality thing as well as just a sheer size thing.
Oh, individual personality. So
they have
within the
individual
same species.
personalities in a distinct way. I could give you predictives. I can say that if I meet a green-winged macaw, a blue and gold macaw, and a scarlet macaw, I'll guess that the scarlet's going to be the aggressive one, the green wing's going to be the nice one, and usually these guys fall in the middle, but it could be completely reversed. They will individually, based on experience, personality, whether they've been handled properly. We get birds in a lot that have some definite behavioral issues. Jellybean, will you let me talk?
Well, they know they're on TV, right? They want
Right.
to participate.
They want to talk too.
Everyone we brought in tonight is more or less cooperative and handleable. We have birds at the shelter who are considerably less. Well, I wouldn't have them sitting on my shoulder for half
Right.
an hour at a time.
Right. Now, are they actually trying to participate because they know something's going on here?
To a degree. Now this one, we get birds in that are in fine shape, like jellybean. But some birds are what we call special needs bird. This one is handicapped. He has a broken wing that did not mend properly. And it doesn't cause him any pain, but it does give him balance issues. And balance is exceedingly important to a parrot-like bird. So if the people don't handle him properly, which is to say moving with this kind of speed, and when you make him step up, you don't give him any room to get away. You've got to keep it close. You've got to keep your arm like this. Yeah. Other birds, I could put my arm down, they climb up to my shoulder. Not advisable, but that's what they would do. But this one has to be very closely watched. I'm going to find somebody who understands that he has to be delicately handled and slowly handled. He's a fine fellow otherwise.
Well, he seems very calm and.
Yes, but
although
one
he's
of the
shaking,
reasons.
So what does that shaking mean?
That shaking is because he's feeling insecure.
Ah.
I've gotten him much more much more stable. When he first came, he was afraid to leave his cage. This is actually the stablest way you can hold such a bird, with a hand in each side. He feels more secure that way. The shivering will go away in a while when he realizes he's not going to fall, nobody's going to eat him.
Now, these birds have not been out in the wild, though. Would they be afraid of
No.
being eaten? Or?
That's
in the
the
wild,
instinct they have.
Okay.
They're not domesticated. They have all of the brain and
of wild
instinct
birds.
going
Right.
on that their parents or grandparents did.
and you back off a little.
Now,
Now,
this-
one thing I'd say about Timbo is
Show
he's
us
very
creature.
comfortable now with my dad. If I tried to pick him up, he'd be more persistent. And if I tried to hand Jellybean off, she'd be more obnoxious.
Now, this is Timbo, the gray,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
They have preferences for what kind of people they like. They have people that they work with regularly in the shelter. We try to discourage that to a degree because we don't want them bonding with us. That can be a
Okay.
problem because
Right.
then they're losing a whole new home whenever they get adopted.
And that's why I wouldn't be scratching him on the head and neck, because I've been working with him otherwise. And I don't want him to bond to me. I want to find somebody who will give him a home forever.
And that's why we require that people come into the shelter and meet the birds, because the bird has to like the person it's going to live with.
Like any other animal, even adopting
Yes.
a dog from a shelter, the dog has to like you. The cat
Yeah.
has to choose you.
You know, if you sent one of these guys home with somebody that they don't like, it's a recipe for disaster.
And we make sure they meet everybody in the household too.
Yeah.
You never know when you're going to get a bird who had a bad experience or is just holding a grudge and will suddenly decide it doesn't like you because of your hat or
Now, most of the birds we get in the shelter have been hatched in the United States because there is a ban on imports. And the ban on imports was the early, 90s. Okay. This bird is a Patagonian conure, and it was born in Patagonia, Argentina. And the reason we know that is because on its foot, it has an open band that means that it was imported.
Oh,
All,
at a time when it was legal.
all birds born or hatched in this country have closed bands.
Yes, a little bit has a close band.
A little bit has a closed band. See how
You're
wide
talking
it
about
is?
like a metal band.
The
to put
metal
on
band.
The leg, right?
Put on
Yeah.
before the leg is full grown.
Yes.
so they-
This is put on before the leg is full grown. This bird was full grown when it got its band, so they had to put it around the full grown leg so they never could close it all the way. So this bird is an imported bird.
So the band happens when they reach the United States. They get
Yes.
the band when they're
Yes.
here. Okay.
So this bird was an imported bird. That's one reason that we know that it's very old. The other reason is it has cataracts in one eye.
Oh, and that's the one that the person who gave it to you told that the bird was a year old.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which clearly was not
Wrong.
true. Right.
Clearly not right.
Yes.
But she's a sweet, sweet bird.
So you mentioned before the show. You mentioned that before people will adopt the birds, they have to meet your criteria for doing that. So well, you mentioned a little bit about that, but
Well, I have to tell us what kind of cage, the housing, the diet. Most citizen birds have a similar diet, but there's some, such as an eclectus or a fig parrot or a lory, that has a specialized diet. So they've got to show that they know diets
oh,
of the bird that they're going to have.
We do accept if they ask us for advice, and
Yeah.
especially for the easier birds to feed.
yeah,
The bird has to like them. They have to be able to handle the bird. Then we do a veterinarian check. They have to give us the name and a phone number of a vet that they use so that we can see that they do take their animals and that their animals are up to date on their care. And we do a home visit to make sure the environment is proper for the bird.
that sounds very time consuming.
It is.
It's time consuming and I use up a lot of gas on my phone. My husband's always complaining.
With the caveat that this applies to type 2 birds and above, like all the ones we have today.
What are type 2?
Okay.
That would be anything more difficult than a parakeet or a cockatiel.
Okay.
The smaller, easier birds can go home the same day if the people know what they're doing and handle the bird and can get a hold of the cage and the food.
And
that's
that
necessary.
we call a type 1 bird?
That's
Smaller birds.
And
parakeets, cockatiels, lovebirds, some other small but less common easy birds, finches.
We would love to have the same rigmarole for them, but we don't have the people or the facility.
Resources are finite.
Yes.
But it's also more likely, I take it, it's more likely that the people will be able to adjust to the birds because they're much easier to take care
They're
of.
much
right?
easier to take care of.
You can trust most people to handle a parakeet.
In fact, when I was a child, my first parakeet came to us because my upstairs neighbor was a trucker, and the truck he was driving had parakeets, and they got to deliver them, and they weren't wanted. So he had a truck full of parakeets. He said, "Hey,
He's
you
passing them
want
out."
one?" Yeah. So he said, "Sure, yeah."
And those can be some of our best times. Every time I give a little kid a cockatiel to take home and love, I figure maybe 5% of them are going to end up where we are in 20 years.
Yeah.
Cursing
We
us.
a year ago we
How we
got
make
we got about 300 parakeets, and they were all in a flock. And we thought, oh my goodness, these birds are going to make horrible pets because they've been wild all their lives. They make the best pets. We have had more people come back who took them and say what a wonderful birds they are. So you just never know. It's just
Now, is there such a thing as a domesticated bird? You've talked about these as being wild birds. So
Yeah,
are there,
it depends on your definition of domestic. Most birds of the parrot family that are domestic are considered that because of selective breeding for color variations and personality. So budgies, budgerigars, parakeets, are considered domestic. They don't know it, but they're considered domestic. Same with cockatiels. You'd be hard-pressed to find a cockatiel that was genetically similar to the ones in Australia. Lovebirds, very much so. They've been color bred to all sorts of extremes.
now, these domesticated birds, would that be an indication that they're easier to handle, or is there?
It would be because over time, the ones that bred and handled easily in captivity were the ones who passed on their genes. But domestication can be other things as well. But they have been genetically selected for humans, therefore they are domestic. Is their personality good for humans? Some yes, some no.
Well, and that's the history of domesticated animals generally, right? I mean, they're bred.
right.
They
right.
breed out the characteristics that are hostile to. I mean,
But
dogs.
the bigger birds, these bigger birds, they're just a generation away from the wild, and they're not domesticated. They are still wild. They still have all the instincts of the wild birds.
You see, to domesticate a macaw, you have to figure on maybe, honestly, 15 years between generations. And that kind of time frame for selecting for traits that you want is not practical.
Yeah.
And
So if you've got a macaw, for example, a type 2 bird, and by the way, are there type 3 birds?
that's a macaw.
Yeah.
That's a macaw. Type 2 are these,
Ah,
smaller
type,
ones.
yeah.
These are type 3.
ah.
We have a type 4 and a type 5, but you won't see those here.
Mostly those are theoretical for us.
The type 5, is that a
Rare.
hawk or
No, we don't have any. We have nothing to do with native birds or raptors. A type 5 is a very rare bird. We have gotten very rare birds in, and we will find special homes for them. Some of them are endangered. Once in a while, we get an endangered bird in. It needs to go someplace to help propagate the species.
And so
It's not a pet.
And so you, being bird specialists, would recognize that right away.
We
Oh,
sure hope
certainly.
so. We sure hope
We
so.
also have to keep on top of what's going on in the natural habitat. For instance, recently we got in a pair of major Mitchell cockatoos. A male and a female bonded to each other, and so far from tame, they might as well have been in Australia. And we couldn't possibly have them go out as pets. But in Australia, there's a 1,000-year drought going on. And a lot of birds that are not especially endangered or threatened there now will be when this drought is over. Parts of the outback are just, drying up, and parts of the coast. So any Australian bird that is not very common, you've got to keep an eye on the captive.
So what do you do in a case like that? These two birds who are bonded to each other, they have to be. They have to
went
stay
together.
right?
They went to a cockatoo breeder.
Okay.
They'll be doing fine, and nobody's going to expect them to ride around the shoulder saying pieces of 8. We will hope they produce baby birds. We're going to give them every chance to do that. Anytime you get a bird like that in, you have to give it the chance.
So I'm curious about how all three of you came to be such aficionados of birds.
Nepotism. This is my
Nepotism.
dad.
You
My
learned
father
early, right?
was interested in birds. He used to work as a volunteer at the Brookfield Zoo, and later at the Field Museum in the 1950s, classifying or working on the collections of West African birds that came in.
Multi-generational nepotism.
Multi-generational nepotism.
I had little birds, parakeets and cockatiels, and when I was growing up, but I always wanted a Moluccan cockatoo. And so finally, I got my Moluccan cockatoo, and then I panicked because I felt like I didn't know how to take care of him, and his name was Boo Boo. And so I joined the bird club, and after I joined the bird club, I got involved.
This bird club that you're
This
still
bird
in.
club, and I got involved with the adoption program. And as my husband said, that Boo Boo was the biggest boo boo we ever made, because things just had gone downhill since.
Yeah, so this is largely a labor of love for all of you.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We put an ungodly number of hours for these creatures who will bite us at the first chance they get.
Kelly's going for my fingers now.
Now, Kelly doesn't like not being the center of attention and not being on his shoulder.
Yes, I see that they've turned their backs on us and on the cameras.
I cannot.
Mostly Kelly's mad because Jelly Bean's on me right now. We try to prevent them from bonding to any one person, but they develop
they do
favorites,
anyway,
and to be
right?
honest, so do we.
Yes.
We all have a list of birds that, given
Okay.
infinite resources, we take home.
Kelly is a
Yes.
red lord. She was morbidly obese when she got in. Now she's sitting down. You can't put them on a fast diet. She was in a cage about 18 inches. long
They
cage.
assured us this was a vicious bronco bird. I'd bite them too if they put me in that cage.
A bronco is a bird keeper's term for a bird that wants to kill you.
Oh,
As
and
soon
that's
as
not
we
an
put her in a
exaggeration,
proper
right?
cage, the first day she was there, Siobhan was petting her. If it is a her, it may be a
We
him.
don't know. You can't tell by looking at Amazons, and it would be unreasonable for us to do vet checks on all of them. Yes.
Especially since we're not promoting breeding.
No.
I mean, there are too many of these birds coming to us right now. The ones that we promote breeding of are the rare ones. These guys aren't terribly rare. These guys are actually common because they have a reputation which they may or may not deserve as the best talking birds.
Even though he's not in the mood to talk to us tonight.
He talks, but he talks on his own terms.
They'll never talk on command.
Yeah.
I had some people in here were asking about a donation for a cage, and he said, how much is this one from across the room? It's a large room. He said, $5. So he can talk. This one can talk very well for a macaw.
Yeah. The best talkers are usually considered to be the grays, the Amazons, at least among the parrots. Mynas are a different thing entirely. But they also have the reputation for high-strung, nippy, and obnoxious. The two seem to come together.
Yeah, the more aggressive a bird is, the more likely it is to be a talker. I have observed that.
Interesting. Interesting. So that they can communicate. Maybe it's part of their communication to you that they're letting you know that they are their own person. Don't mess with me.
Yeah, and I think it goes with being smart. You know, they're smart. They have smarter people. Sometimes are difficult to deal with.
And they get bored
Smarter
more
birds
easily.
are-
This
yeah,
is
they get bored
entertainment.
more easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
I love
noticed,
these
this one is just loving me to death.
I
over
can
here.
see that. Yes, she's about ready to just
She's going to crawl right in my mouth.
Yes, she looks that way. All right.
So
Kelly is
They're,
an unusually placid Amazon. They have a well-deserved reputation for the most aggressive of your standard cage birds, but
A red lord Amazon is
You
supposed to
decided to
be
ship.
very much a one-person bird, but whoever pets her. is
So
that
if
person.
for people watching this who would look at this and think, wow, those look really cool, I'd like to check that out. What
Like-
would you?
come to the shelter, come and visit the birds. Come and play with them, spend time with them, see what kind of bird that you like, see what kind of bird bonds with you.
make
know.
sure you can handle noise,
Make
feather
su-
dust, and nipping.
Yes, you know, learn as much as you can. There's a wealth of information on the internet about birds. Learn as much as you can. It's not like having a dog or a cat. You can't put it in a corner and tell it to stay.
Oh.
It's not going to do it. It never will do it, okay?
And I will tell you, if I'm there, to people the truth as I know it. In a pet store, they want to make a sale.
Right.
I don't have that motivation, so I will tell you what bird is good. It's understanding yourself as much as the bird, what your life style is like.
Yeah, if you're never home, then you don't want a bird.
Because the bird needs company.
Bird needs company, needs someone there. So if you're never home, then you want two parakeets. You know,
They'll keep each other
they'll
company.
keep each other company. But you don't want a single bird because the bird needs to have a flock.
They have
So-
a tendency to like birds or people.
And but how about other animals? If you have cats, dogs, whatever.
They are company, but they're not as good a company because dogs and cats are more placid. They lay around, they sleep a lot.
Birds need to be active.
Birds need to be active and interactive.
Remember, the primary relationship in most of nature is that between a predator and
prey.
its prey. These are prey species. Their eyes are on the side, that's to see all the way around. They have to be alert. They can't drop their concentration. Dogs and cats are predators. Their eyes are for
Focused.
binocular vision, and they're only active if they feel like being active for hunting or playing. So sometimes the two don't mix. Now sometimes they do. My poodle, a standard poodle, a water dog, a bird dog, absolutely ignores the birds. He's so much as told me he has evolved, and
And the birds
that's
are-
it. And he's not going to be bothered with them. Leave him alone.
Well, speaking of leaving the birds alone, we're already out of time.
Okay.
So I want to thank you so much for coming here. It's been a great pleasure. I
Thank
love
you.
meeting you and the birds. And good luck to you with the Cage Birds Club.
Thank you.
Okay.
You've been visiting with us and with the birds. On Public Perspective, I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. I don't own a bird currently, but who knows. So you can see us every Saturday night at 8 o'clock on Comcast Channel 19, and you can find us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So until next time, thank you and good night.